Hey guys, I'm Daniel, married to Melissa, and I'm going to be doing auto maintenance with you guys. And as you know, I can't be there in person, so I'm going to do it here from home. But if you guys have any questions or anything like that, you can always talk to Regina. She can email me, I can email you back, so we can go that route. But anyway, so let's get started. This is a pretty nice car. I'm sure everybody would like to have it, but unfortunately, we probably most of us can't afford it. So I always like to show everybody what my first car looked like. Um, what a beauty, right? Okay, so that's kind of gives you something to laugh at. So on this automotive maintenance, we're basically going to be going through some features here. The key points are going to be the fluids, the tires, and the battery. How to jump a car if it has a dead battery. So some helpful hints and safety tips. Number one, first of all, guys, pay attention. Don't speed. Okay. Not only is it dangerous, but also it's just not, it's harder on your brakes, harder on your tires. If you want to start that maintenance, go the speed limit. If you're coming into a red light, don't try to beat that red light. Don't try to slam on the brakes. So that's a pretty good tip. Texting and driving, that's another good one to start off with. So since we're talking about the maintenance and everything, cars that are not maintained well, obviously are not going to be safe. That falls under the category of maybe having like bald tires, something like that. If you're not going to maintain it, then you're not going to have the right kind of traction. Fourth is a good one. It doesn't hurt to pack some items. I mean, you could take a flashlight, you could put a blanket in the wintertime. You could even take some snacks or something that obviously is not going to melt, or something that, if you're out and you're hungry. Also, to have jumper cables. You can go to Walmart, you can buy jumper cables that are, in a nice little package, and you can put them in your back of your car, in your trunk, anything like that. That way, that's something good to have. Also, another one that's pretty important is a phone charger. I mean, a lot of us have them, but if you do find yourself not having that phone charger, always maybe have an extra one that'll plug in. You never know when they go bad. You could be out and your phone could die. And also another important one is know your weather conditions. You may think, oh, I can stay here a few more hours and the snowstorm's coming. I can stay another hour, but you don't know what's happening. Weather can change so fast. So just be mindful of that. That's something that you can get yourself in big trouble with. Heavy rains, or a lot of snow and a lot of cars piling up and getting in accidents and making you late. Another one is keep your car full. It's always a good idea to, once you get to that halfway point, always be mindful to put more gas in it. Okay, so we're going to look at just some different, when you're driving and you're looking at what's called a cluster panel, or your gauges. This is kind of what's going to start to tell you what's going on. This is going to be your communication area. So some key things you want to look for are any lights that pop up. Obviously, this is like your parking brake would be on. So you just kind of want to pay attention to that. So in this next one, these are a little bit different, but there's something on this slide that is indicating something is wrong. If you guys can see it, it's this little engine light. It looks like a little submarine. And most vehicles, that same submarine, I call it, or that engine is kind of universal. They kind of look the same across all different vehicles. So don't think it's going to look different than another one. It's going to be pretty generic. So pay attention to that. Also, you're going to have your fuel gauge. That's going to be here. This is your speedometer, obviously. And then this is your tachometer, how many RPMs your car is running. And then you have your oil, which is another important one. We'll go over that as well. And you want to make sure you have good oil pressure. Now, on these, usually oil pressure should be in that, depends on what the car manufacturer says, but if this is ever way down in this area, then you know your oil pressure is probably low. Have it checked out. And if you think 4 gauges is a lot, this is the pump handle on one of our fire trucks. So I'm a firefighter, so I have to deal with all this. So anyways, I think 4 of them you guys can pay attention to. Okay, so here's just some warning lights, some basic warning lights that are, some of these are kind of universal. You'll see them in different vehicles. They might have a little bit variance in them, but they are important. And so these are good just to kind of look at and think about, you know, obviously if you have a gas, you're not going to have a diesel, so you don't have glow plugs. So like I said, this is just kind of covers the different lights that could possibly be in your vehicle. Now I'm going to point out some of them that are pretty important. This goofy thing is supposed to look like a tire, and that's supposed to look like it's low. So that is your tire pressure. A lot of vehicles now have sensors on them in the dash that tell this light to go off, and some of those sensors do go bad. So you could keep putting air in a tire, and then all of a sudden you're like, okay, my tire's showing it's full, but this light's still on. So then you would go to a tire place and maybe have the sensor, you know, have them check it out. So that's an important one. This is that submarine I was talking about, kind of that engine management. If that pops on, it's going to tell you there's something, either a hose, something is off, maybe just needs to be checked. Doesn't mean that the car is going to just break down and die on you. It just means, hey, there's something going on in this engine compartment area that needs to be looked at. Another one is your temperature. That's going to be something on a really hot summer day. If you're got the air conditioner running and full blast and it's, you know, 100 degrees out and you've been sitting in traffic, that might pop on. A lot of cars now, they manage that really well, so that's not as prevalent as it used to be. So that's a good one to pay attention to. The other one is the oil pressure warning light, and that's kind of what I talked about before in that previous slide. If you see where that's all the way down to like 0, this oil pressure light should be on. That's something else to pay attention to. So those are the 4 kind of key features on these. Obviously, if you don't have your seatbelt on, it's going to be like that. So we all know what that is. So just pay attention to those. So some questions on maintenance, when to rotate tires. So it's recommended, and another thing too is always pay attention to the manufacturer, what they say. If you buy a specific tire brand, that brand might say something a little different than the other manufacturer. So if you go get tires put on somewhere, you always want to get that information. But they should be rotated every 6 months or 6,000, 8,000 miles. That's just a good place to start. We'll go over what a worn tire looks like and kind of see how to visually see that. You also want to change your oil every 3,000 to 3,500 miles. Once again, if you don't drive that much, you drive, you know, might take a while to put that many miles before you do an oil change. So if you do have a regular maintenance that you do take your vehicle, they're going to look at it and they'll kind of determine whether you need that oil change. So getting into oil, transmission, and how to change those, you're gonna, first of all, once you open up the hood, usually you go inside the car, it'll be kind of down below the steering wheel. You'll pop the hood open, and they usually have like a latch or something in that hood, so you lift that hood up. Then they have a little, like a stick, basically, it comes up and it just holds the hood up. And so underneath the hood, this is what it's gonna look like. So your oil handle is basically on pretty much every manufacturer is gonna make that yellow. That's gonna indicate where the oil is gonna be, where the dipstick is, and that dipstick is where you're gonna pull that out and you're gonna check the oil. The red indicates transmission. So that transmission, this one usually goes away from the engine, this one goes towards it. And you'll see this is the engine up here. You guys know that big part on the top, that'll be the top of the engine. Okay, so checking the oil, that's another important thing. You don't need to drive your car every time to an oil place to have it checked. You know, it's something you need to kind of learn to do yourself. You don't have to check the oil every time you get in the vehicle, but it is good. You know, every so many fill ups, you might want to just pop the hood and check that oil. Just make sure your car's not burning oil. because if it starts to burn oil, then you're obviously going to need to add oil. So finding that yellow handle, what we're going to do is we're going to get that yellow handle out. We're going to pull it straight out. And sometimes that yellow handle actually has it stamped on top where it says oil. So it's a pretty good indication, right? So you're going to pull that dipstick, you're going to pull it straight out, and it's going to have oil all over, the bottom portion of the dipstick. And then you're going to take a rag, something like that, or even a paper towel works great because you can just throw it away. And you're going to wipe that dipstick, and now you have a clean dipstick. You can start at the very top and wipe it all the way down and get it nice and clean. And then after you clean it, you're going to replace that dipstick back into the holder. So what you're doing is you're just getting that out, getting a fresh start. You're getting it nice and clean. Now the other key thing too is you don't want to check the oil when you've been driving and that oil's hot and it's all, you got to give it time to kind of settle back down into that oil pan. So it's a good thing to maybe check before you go driving a lot, be easier. So plus it'd be hot. So you're gonna go ahead and you're gonna put that yellow handle dipstick back into the holder. And then, so after replacing the clean dipstick, pull it straight back out again. Okay, and this time you're not going to wipe it clean. So you'll take and you'll do a visual reading and you'll look at the bottom. That little portion on the bottom, what's going to have, it's going to look like it's going to have a bunch of marks cut in it, and those marks are called the hash marks. And I'll show you guys that on the next slide what those look like. So when you pull that out, just make sure you don't pull it out and wipe it again. Just pull it out and hold it up so the oil doesn't drip off the end. Usually it doesn't, but it just kind of hold up one end or both ends. So this is kind of the hash marks I was talking about. Right here, I'm going to tell you your level. Obviously you're going to add oil into this section here, and then here you're going to be okay, and then obviously it's full to the top. So the manufacturer knows obviously where to place all these hash marks and where to put all this. And so that's going to be a real easy read for you. Now, if you're somewhere in here, you're probably okay for a little while, and you're going to have to, we'll go over this in a minute, but you're going to have to kind of figure out how much oil to add. You don't want to just dump a quart of oil in there. You want to keep doing that same process of putting it in, giving it a minute for the oil to run down, and just keep checking it. But this is going to be your guide, okay? So here's just some visuals on different oils as they burn in the engine, and obviously oil, the older it gets, the hotter it gets, the more it gets used, it loses that viscosity and it starts to turn basically black. This would be good. It's kind of a translucent thing, really slick, really fine. Then obviously this is just showing your low oil. So the oil's not going to always be this color once you run it through, because obviously it's going to mix with maybe some of that older residual oil. So just remember, you're not always, and may never see oil this clean. Doesn't mean that it's old. Just like I said before, keep track of that maintenance, like how many miles you change that oil. So just kind of keep that in mind. So like I said again, just pay attention, make sure it drains. I already mentioned that. Okay, so talked about the top of the engine, kind of looking at the visual on that previous slide. And this is what you're gonna see. You're gonna see a cap on top, and that cap's gonna say engine oil. I mean, they're literally, most all vehicles are right there. They might be off to the side a little bit. So you're gonna take that cap off. And here's, you guys have seen these, I'm sure. These are quart bottles of oil. Okay, now these quart bottles are gonna be, they're gonna be marked with different measurements here. And you can take those, the side is kind of clear where you can see how much oil you're adding. So it kind of gives you a good marker of, hey, I put half the bottle in, or I put, almost the whole bottle in. So just make sure you use that as a tool as well. So just keep checking it as you add the oil, and that oil will actually go right in here, and you'll just start dumping it in, and you'll dump a little bit in, you'll wait, and then you'll pull this dipstick out again, you'll wipe it clean, put it back in, check it. It takes a few tries, but eventually you'll start to see it kind of climb up on that hash mark. Okay, another thing is there's different types of oil. We're really not going to get into that too much. The 10W30, these are different, what they call different weight oils. So in the wintertime, basically what that means is something will be thicker or thinner in the weight. And some manufacturers want a really watery type oil, some want a thicker oil. So make sure you go to like AutoZone or O'Reilly's or somewhere and just say, hey, this is the model vehicle I have. What weight of oil should I put in it? Okay, so talked about oil, how to put that in, how to check it. Also, what we need to think about too, this is not as important as your transmission fluid. So transmission fluid, the difference between this is that, now that's the red handle typically. So we looked in that slide, we saw the yellow handle and the red handle, and that red handle is what's going to be your transmission. What you want to look at, it's going to have the same type of deal as your oil with the hash mark, but instead of just being a hash mark on one side, it's actually going to tell you when you're reading it if it's hot or cold, and you can do that. So oil, you check with the engine off, okay? Transmission fluid can be checked with the engine running, with it in park, and then the transmission can be hot or cold, so you're going to look for the red handle. So just remember that if your car is, you've been driving and it seems like the transmission's slipping or something doesn't feel right or it's not shifting right, then you can check this when it's hot. Just make sure that you flip it over to the hot, and you'll see it, it'll fall in this hash mark. And they don't usually say okay, it'll just say either add or full, and then you'll have your hash mark there. So that's strictly transmission fluid. Okay, so let's get into tires, the anatomy of the tire. There's actually a lot of information on a tire, typically that kind of gets overlooked. You don't necessarily have to know what everything is on it, but it does help. So as you can see on the anatomy of this tire, it's gonna just show you your tread wear traction, temperature grades, what is it rated as? It's a passenger vehicle. That basically means just not a heavy duty truck or a tractor trailer or something like that. There are different plies of tire, and the heavier the ply, the more plies, the bigger the tire, the bigger the truck it can go on, or the more weight it can actually hold. This is gonna kind of tell you just the different sizes, the wheel, the diameter, like I said, how much load can go on that, and how fast this tire is rated for. And like I said, if you do regular maintenance and you take your car somewhere, they can say, oh yeah, that car needs this size tire. People do put different size tires on vehicles. It changes your fuel economy as far as better fuel or worse fuel. It also changes your speedometer. If you have a different tire, this tire is rated at say 95 and you want to go 100, I mean, your speedometer and everything is going to be off. Okay, so that's kind of the basics there. All right, so now on tires, the real important thing about maintenance on a tire is always keeping it at its appropriate amount of air in that tire. You don't want to over exceed it, and you don't want to under inflate it. What that's going to do is, if you overinflate it, the way that tire is made, it may get a bulge in it, and you're going to wear down a certain part of that tire. If it's too low, then it won't have enough to hold it the certain way it should be on the pavement, and that's going to wear it down faster. So just remember, excuse me, just remember tires are really expensive, and it just takes a second to check the air in them, and you can save a lot of money just by doing a quick maintenance check on them. So just remember that. Don't let it go. Just, like I said, every 10, 15 fill-ups, check your tires, or if you see one getting low, check it. Okay, so looking at the slide, this is gonna, more information on the side of the tire like we just talked about. This is actually gonna show you your load, well, how many pounds of pressure this tire can take, and it says 1,400 pounds at 44 PSI, okay? PSI is pounds per square inch. So if you see PSI, that's basically what it's telling you how much air to put in. So this kind of just again, what I said, and don't exceed that. And we kind of went over that. Don't underinflate it, don't overinflate it. Right here, the like I said before, this is 44 psi. That's pounds per square inch. Okay, so when you fill up the tire, you're gonna look for this this little cap here, and this is actually just gonna be the stem sticking out. You're gonna remove that cap, and this is what it's gonna look like. It's gonna be just that stem. You might guys remember filling up old bike, you know, your bike tire. It's almost the exact same thing. It just might be a little bit heavier duty. Okay, same concept. So you're gonna look for that, remove that cap. Now this right here, you guys might have seen this at gas stations. This is an air chuck, and you're gonna take that chuck and you're gonna put it right up against that stem, and you're gonna hear air start to kind of rush into that tire. So go ahead and push it in. Some tires you have to push a little harder, but as you're pushing that and you kind of hear that air kind of rush in a little bit, you know you're getting air in there. If you're not hearing it right, then just kind of push a little harder. I typically watch the tires, I fill it up, and I kind of, hit my hand against it and just, you know, like, okay, and then I check it with a pressure gauge, which I'm gonna show you guys what that looks like. So this is a version of a pressure gauge. These work really well. So just remember, when you're looking at that pressure, you're gonna be in PSI. So here's PSI on this number here. And this kind of does both. So you're gonna look at that and that'll tell you if you need 55, you're gonna be just above that 50 on your pressure on that. And then this is kind of a pencil, I call them pencil gauges. Just this long skinny thing that you do this basically the same thing, stick it in there. And this is a little slide, and it has a measurement tool on it, and that will slide out. As soon as you poke it on there, this just kind of slides out real fast, and that'll give you a reading. So those are two really good gauges to use. Just remember that, go pick one up. Walmart's got them, probably maybe a couple dollars for that. This one might be a little bit more. This is kind of for bigger tires, a dual range. Okay, so now we're kind of moving on. We're still talking about the tires, and this is just a good, like I said, if you're getting gas and every now and then you think your tires are getting bald, this is a good way to check it. And basically what you're doing is you're taking Abraham Lincoln's head and you're just flipping the coin over, and you're gonna stick it down in the tread. As you can see, if new tires, you need them soon, if his head is pretty much just, if his head's not buried in that tread. If it's a little bit in his hair, then, you know, or a lot covering his forehead, then you're probably fine for a while. But like I said, this is just a quick gauge to see if your tires are not completely bald, okay? Make sure you have some tread on them. Okay, so keeping your tires inflated is important. Now, if you get a nail in your tire, obviously it's not gonna hold air. This is gonna be a flat tire. So you're either gonna have to call a tow truck or someone, but you may not always have that luxury, so you're gonna have to change the tire. So here's some quick components of just the tire, the jack, and everything that comes in, usually in most vehicles. Now here's another key point I want to point out is that if you guys do buy a used vehicle, be very particular to look in the back. You know, lift up that back carpet, lift up that back little piece of cardboard, take a look at the spare tire, make sure there's at least one in there, and then make sure all the parts and pieces are with it. It's very important to have that. Somebody might sell you a car that doesn't have this stuff, and then you basically have no option. So that's an important thing. So right here we have number one is a spare tire. These spare tires are going to be smaller, obviously, than the actual tire that's on the rim that came with the vehicle, and they're rated to go a little bit slower. Basically, this spare tire, you don't want to drive on it any more than you have to. You want to get this on, and you want to drive straight to a repair place and get that fixed. So spare tire, this right here is called a scissor jack or a screw jack. Basically what that does is you crank it right here and it just kind of goes up and it lifts up the vehicle. We'll go over that in a minute. So that's a screw jack, and then you have the tire iron or the lug wrench, and basically that's going to take off these lugs right here. This one has 5, this one has 4, so these are not on the same vehicle, but that's where your lugs will be. And this will fit right on those lugs to take those off. Also, you're gonna have an extension and then a screwdriver. That screwdriver basically is to pop off any type of, if you don't have this type of tire and you have like a tire that has a cap on it, you're gonna have to take that screwdriver and pop that cap off sometimes to get to those lug nuts, okay? Okay, so we just talked about that screw jack, and I kind of want to go over that because it is important to kind of figure out how to set that up. Basically, most vehicles will show you, and in fact, you can actually go to the side of your vehicle and look, and you'll see sometimes they'll have like a little arrow or tab or something in there that gives you an indication that this screw jack is actually going to go right in that location, and that's what you're going to use. You guys can see that. That's going to kind of go into that notch or that little, it'll show you like, hey, put it right here. And then you're going to take that extension and start cranking this thing. And as you start to crank it, it starts to kind of go up like this, and it lifts the car up, okay? So just remember that jack placement on that. The other thing too is if you're changing a tire, just make sure that you have the car in park, and if you do have an emergency brake, go ahead and set that. Doesn't hurt at all to have it on. If you think your car is going to roll, or you have, throw a block under one of the tires that you're not changing, okay? Okay, so like I said before, here's that location of that screw jack, and pretty much 99% of the vehicles, passenger car vehicles, come with this type of jack. It's so light and it's super strong, and you'll probably have this on every vehicle you own, okay? So just remember that, they're pretty common. This is what it looks like. There's that little notch right there. Okay. All right, so that pretty much, we went over fluids, batteries, fluids and tires. And so now we're gonna go over batteries. And this is gonna kind of go over your negative and positive post. It's gonna go over where to place those jumper cables, things like that. So let's move on to that. Okay, so batteries. So when your car loses power or dies, this battery is gonna need to be jumped. Now, batteries don't just typically go bad unless they get old. Without getting into too much, there's a thing called an alternator on your vehicle, and that alternator keeps this battery charged. Okay, as the car is running, it's helping itself out and it's charging this battery. Sometimes the alternator goes out and then it just slowly drains the battery. Good indication of that is if your radio or your lights start to go dim, then that's going to start to show you that the battery, something's happening there. Okay, so typical batteries, like I said, this is pretty much what every car is going to have in it. It's going to have these two posts. You guys can see those there. Here they have a marked with a red and a black. This is going to be your positive, and this is going to be your negative. And they will show you that on top of the battery. Typically, most batteries have this mark here, or it might be on the side of the battery. You just kind of have to look for it. Some people put, these little protectors on here because they don't want the battery acid to get everywhere. So you can even look for that. Remember, red is always positive. Now this one's kind of like a green color, but that's still positive, or negative, I'm sorry. And then you can see the black post right next to it. So that's a good indication right there. Okay, so to keep everything simple, obviously, our jumper cables are gonna kind of follow suit of that battery. So you're gonna have the black, like we talked about, was a negative, and then the red, obviously, is a positive. So those two should always stay the same. Shouldn't switch them around, get confused, anything like that. Jumper cables, they're gonna have the red and the black. They're gonna be like a clamp, and you're gonna squeeze that, and that's what's gonna go over those two posts. Now, those two posts, if it's a new battery, it's gonna have those plastic covers. Those have to come off and expose that metal, okay? So when we're hooking up batteries, a dead battery with a good battery, and we're jumping vehicles back and forth, it's something really good to look at this diagram here and either remember it or have this with you, or maybe put this in your car or something like that. And basically what this is going to show you is this is the battery that's going to be dead, and you're going to start by putting that positive red on the dead battery, and then you're gonna run that positive over to the good battery. And then step 2, once those two are on, you're gonna hook up the black one on that dead battery, and you're gonna run that over. Now you can put it back onto here, and it's recommended that you actually take this and you ground it to something like on the engine compartment. Don't stick it on the engine, but like if you look underneath the hood, there's kind of like metal all around. You can maybe take it and stick it on that. Sometimes there's paint on there. You kind of have to, what I do is I stick it on there and I just kind of move it back and forth and kind of scratch the paint a little bit, you know, on the metal, not on the outside of the car, obviously, but inside that compartment where no one sees that metal. You kind of want to make sure you have a good ground there. So just make sure you get, and actually some vehicles have a little post that you put this one on. So that's an option too. You just have to look at it. Like I said before, look at your manual if you get one with your vehicle, and that's going to show you pretty much, you know, everything you know about that vehicle. And then another thing to watch out for, so charging a battery also generates hydrogen, okay? And because that heat drives the hydrogen output, you can expect more trouble generally in hot weather. The danger is that hydrogen will explode if a spark occurs nearby. Well, you put two of these cables together, a negative and a positive, they're gonna spark. So don't ever touch these two together. You know, be very precise about how you hook it up, and don't ever take those black and reds and hit them together. You get a big spark, okay? All right, so just kind of a funny slide. This is all the vehicles that myself and my wife have owned over the years. So I have had some experience with these, and as you can see, I've had some trucks in here, and there's that beautiful red vehicle that I had, one of my first ones. Actually, this is more kind of like my first car, is a white Mustang. So that was kind of fun. But yeah, so you can kind of see different manufacturers. You're gonna have different tires. Obviously, these rated tires here are, you know, much heavier duty than these, or, you know, these little ones, or even van tires. So just make sure you get the right tires on them, and, you know, make sure you're getting the right maintenance for that particular vehicle. And then here's kind of my new vehicle. So this is a completely different setup, so bigger tires, you know, and it can haul a lot more. So anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed it. Like I said, I'm doing this from home. If you have any questions, I know she kind of shot me some questions that you guys maybe had. If I didn't cover them in the slides, just have Regina shoot me another email, and then I'll try to email her back and kind of go over some of that stuff with her, and she can relay it back to you guys. So anyways, appreciate it, guys. Take care.